Good morning, I'm Maiki Oreta and you're watching Business 360, where we break down the numbers, connect the dots, and give you the developments and the insights you need to navigate, adapt, and lead. Let's dive right in. President Bongbong Marcos touches down in the U.S. to meet with President Donald Trump. They're expected to discuss the 20% tariff on Philippine products. The country's debt service burden rises to $4.9 billion in the first 5 months of the year. And Philippine Ambassador to the United States, Jose Manuel Romualdez, warns thousands of undocumented Filipinos could be deported as the Trump administration cracks down on illegal immigrants. Let's take a look at how global markets moved overnight. They moved cautiously as tariff fears made a comeback. Wall Street ended mixed after reports said U.S. President Donald Trump is pushing for new tariffs on European Union goods. He's reportedly considering duties of 10 to 20% as part of a possible trade deal, sparking a mid-session dip before markets steadied.
Tariffs will be a persistent topic of conversation and a driver of markets to some extent for some period of time, but not for the indefinite future. And we think there will be a lot of bluster, a lot of loud conversations, a lot of headlines, but at the end of the day, we're most likely to end up basically where we started in terms of tariff rates in general. Perhaps there'll be some level of elevated tariffs, but not significant. They will not be significantly, but they will not be significant enough to really impact the overall economy.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average slipped 0.3%. The S&P 500 closed nearly flat. The Nasdaq added just 0.1%. Over in Europe, it was a mixed finish. London's FTSE gained 0.2%, Germany's DAX lower by 0.3%, and France's CAC 40 was little changed. The Philippines isn't just bracing for U.S. tariffs, it's making a counteroffer. Finance Secretary Ralph Recto says Manila is open to lowering duties on select American goods in exchange for lower or zero tariffs on Philippine exports. The move aims to blunt the impact of Washington's proposed 20% tariff on Filipino goods. Recto also pushed for a full free trade agreement with the United States and other partners to widen market access and attract investments. The U.S. is the Philippines' top export destination, accounting for over $1.1 billion in sales just last May. This isn't just damage control, it's a pivot. The real question is whether or not Washington is listening. President Bongbong Marcos touches down in Washington, D.C. as trade tensions between Manila and Washington take center stage. He's on a 3-day visit, official visit, and is expected to meet with U.S. President Donald Trump. On top of their agenda, the 20% tariff imposed by the U.S. on Philippine exports, which is set to take effect this August 1st. The trip also aims to strengthen bilateral ties from trade and investment to defense and regional security. The visit comes at Trump's invitation and could set the tone for future Philippine-U.S. economic talks. And here's what to watch. This isn't just a diplomatic courtesy call. It's a high-stakes negotiation that could shape the future of Philippine exports, supply chains, and our standing in a shifting global order. On another front, the country's debt service burden creeps higher, hitting $4.9 billion in the first 4 months of the year. Data from the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas shows this is up slightly from last year's $4.8 billion over the same period. The BSP says the figure covers both principal and interest payments, including rescheduled obligations. With global borrowing costs still elevated, the pressure is on to manage debt more strategically and to shield the economy from future payment shocks. The tax collections from the Bureau of Internal Revenue and Bureau of Customs rose in June, but the pressure is building to hit their full-year targets. The BIR collected 200.5 billion pesos last month, up from 170 billion in June of 2024. Customs collected 77 billion pesos, slightly higher than the 74.6 billion pesos a year ago. Finance Secretary Ralph Recto attributed the gains to VAT, excise, and corporate taxes, but he warns Customs may miss its target due to sliding rice prices and suspended electric vehicle tariffs. To offset shortfalls, the BOC is pursuing a 50 billion peso catch-up plan and a 5-point priority strategy for 2025 to boost collections. The test ahead, balancing revenue with recovery. As rate cuts approach, the fiscal side must deliver without choking growth. The Energy Regulatory Commission has a new chairperson, and he's looking to shake things up. At stake, electricity rates, supply contracts, and the rules governing billions in energy investments. New ERC Chief Francis Juan is calling for a full review of the performance-based rate-setting scheme, the very framework that governs just how private distribution utility firms like Meralco price their power. He's also reopening power supply agreements that have already cleared the competitive selection process, a move that could impact long-term energy deals and market stability. And he wants to revisit how the agency determines rates for electric cooperatives, which serve millions of households in provinces across the country. Juan says his priority is the Filipino consumer, promising to make the regulator more efficient, more accountable, and more responsive to a changing energy landscape. A new push to ban online gambling is gaining ground in the Senate with a second high-profile bill now on the table. Senator Lauren Legarda is backing a full ban on all forms of online gambling, citing addiction, exploitation, and growing risks to the poor and to the youth. Her proposal comes days after Senate President Mig Zubiri filed a similar measure. Legarda says that the shift from casinos to smartphones has exposed vulnerable Filipinos to serious financial and psychological harm. Her bill seeks to outlaw online casinos, e-sabong, virtual slots, sports betting, and even their ads. Violators, whether individuals or companies, could face fines and even jail time. With two powerful senators now driving the issue, the question isn't just whether online gambling will be regulated, but whether it will be erased entirely. We're taking a quick break. Please stay with us as we dive deep into the numbers and the narratives that matter most to your bottom line. Welcome back. Let's check on how Asian markets are doing this Monday morning. Right now, the Nikkei 225 is in the red, lower by 0.2%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index is going the other way, higher by 0.4%. Shanghai's Composite up by 0.4% as well. Singapore's Straits Times Index up a little higher, up by 0.6%. Now, here at home, Philippine shares ended slightly higher last Friday, snapping out of a 3-day losing streak as investors braced for trade talks between President Marcos and U.S. President Donald Trump. The PSE index inched up by 0.1% to 63.04, boosted by late block sales despite lingering uncertainty over tariff developments. Volume hit 1.66 billion shares, valued at 8.43 billion pesos. But week on week, the index lost 2.42% as sentiment shifted on news of a 20% U.S. tariff on Philippine exports. This week, the market is expected to move sideways, with traders tracking the Marcos-Trump meeting, trade negotiations, and pre-SONA positioning. Chart watchers see support at 61.05 to 6,200, with resistance at around 6,500. Taking a look at our market this morning, as of 10:17, main gauge is in the green, higher by 0.2% to 63.17. The broader all shares up as well, slightly flat with a slight upward bias at 37.39. Out of all these sub-indices, everything is in the green except for the industrial counter, which is slightly limiting the market's advance, lower by just about 0.2%. Volume is at 244 million shares. Value turnover stands at just a little over a billion pesos in early trade. Market breadth is slightly positive. We've got 67 advancers, 64 decliners, and 42 stocks unchanged. Taking a look at the currency market, the peso opened stronger at 57.10 from the dollar, up from Friday's close of 57.15. Now, is the government really slapping a 20% tax on your bank deposits? While viral posts claim a new tax is coming, experts say it's just a reform to fix a long existing loophole. But concerns persist over how it's being framed and implemented. Sujin Kim has the details.
Worried that your entire bank savings will now be taxed 20%? Several posts online claim the government is slapping a new 20% tax on your bank deposits, but the Department of Finance calls this fake news, insisting that the Capital Markets Efficiency Promotion Act, or CIMEPA, simply corrects a long-existing loophole. Top stakeholders, including the Management Association of the Philippines, the Bankers Association, and the Asian Consulting Group, are now speaking up to set the record straight.
Obviously, it is a wrong perception. The final tax has always been 20%. All CIMEPA did was apply that same rate on the deposits that are over 5 years and on dollar deposits, which I agree with the statements of the government that those were really for the wealthier people.
The 20% final tax has been there since the 1997 tax reform. And that is the 20% final tax on the interest income, not on the deposit itself, on the interest income of savings account. There is no new tax, and the tax is not on the deposit, but on the interest income, and not on the savings account, because there is already been subject to 20% final tax since the 1997 Tax Reform Act. So that's very clear.
For economist Filomeno Santa Ana, standardizing tax rates is about correcting a long-standing imbalance. Economist JC Punongbayan says most Filipinos are not affected by the new rule. According to industry leaders, the tax is simply being made uniform to correct an old system that allegedly favored the wealthy.
I would say that the people who are affected are very few, mostly the wealthy who are affected by this tax. For normal savings deposits, for people who do time deposits, like the ordinary Filipinos, there is no change at all. The CIMEPA actually is quite good. It puts a uniform tax across all. It makes execution simpler. It makes investors able to understand the tax regime of this country easier.
Tax advisor Mon Abrea also clarified that the viral posts are misleading. The tax is not on sale.
We have small deposits who are always taxed 20%.
Beyond fixing the tax system, CIMEPA also aims to encourage Filipinos to participate in the capital market.
So the good news is it will encourage us to invest in the stock market, and that there will be a fairer imposition of tax on all deposit. The bad news is specifically for those 0.4% who are actually maintaining time deposits with 5 years or more maturity. It's a message to all of us to diversify, to consider investing in the stock market or other investment portfolio, which will have lesser taxes.
But economic think tank Ibon Foundation disagrees, calling the move regressive and maintaining that the rate for the ultra-rich shouldn't be the same for the rest. Further adding that ordinary lower-income families should not be pushed into participating in the capital markets. Sujin Kim, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
A 20% U.S. tariff is set to kick in on Philippine exports this August 1st. And for many, it feels like a big swing at a small target. We make up just 2/10 of U.S. imports, yet we're taking a full force hit. Joining us live now is Sergio Ortiz Luis Jr., President of the Employers Confederation of the Philippines and Philexport, to break down the shockwaves this could send through our export sector, jobs, and the Philippines' position in global trade. Good morning, sir. Thank you for being with us.
Good morning, Maiki. Good morning to our the ones watching us now.
All right. It's an interesting discussion, punctuated by the fact that our president is in the United States now, set to meet with his counterpart, Donald Trump, to talk about this very issue. Let's start with your gut reaction to the 20%. We were bracing for 17. When that 20% figure was announced, what was your initial reaction, sir?
Well, normally I think the 17% was okay with us, no? Because all our competitors were higher than us. Unfortunately, when the 20% was given to us, an increase of 3%, the highest increase. The others were given 1%, increase, were the highest. And what is really discouraging is that Vietnam, who coming from 46%, was brought down to the same level as ours, 20%.
Yeah.
And that will be something that a bad sign, because everybody's negotiating on the side. And what happens if, like Thailand, Malaysia, were able to negotiate, and I don't know what leverage we still have in negotiation.
Yeah.
We've given the U.S. everything. We're the best ally here. I know for a fact that one of the leverage that they will be using is what Trump wanted before. You know, if you watch the interviews of Trump before the election, he was saying, I will shoot sanction, even for Russia, because it doesn't work. They just put together people against us. But I will use tariff. So what he did is he weaponized tariff, not necessarily for what people think, balancing trade. No. It is basically geopolitical. And what does he want? In the same breath, he was saying, we would like to preserve the use of the US dollar as the primary currency, because if we lose that, we lost a war. And at the same time, he also was mentioning about BRICS. He doesn't want that. So these are the things that others can offer. No? And what do we have to offer? We have given them everything.
Yes. Speaking of what we can offer, sir, Finance Secretary Ralph Recto says Manila is open to lowering duties on select American products in exchange for lower tariffs. What do you think of this leverage, if you'd even call it that? What do you think of this strategy?
Well, again, our export to the U.S. is so small. I think to the U.S. it is 1/5 of 1%. No? And more than half of that is electronics. So you lower the tariff on that. What will our other countries say? What will China say? What will they will expect that also from them. So, and I think the ones that you can offer basically will be possibly tariff on agriculture. We cannot afford anymore giving up tariff on agriculture, because we will be inundated by agricultural products from the U.S. And frankly, I would say it might be even passing to the U.S., but not the U.S. products. No? So I think the best negotiating posture we have, and I think the president can handle that very well, is reminding Trump, or the negotiator, what the Philippines is to them strategically in this area of the world, and what we have given them, that we have no negotiating leverage, because we have given them up even before this, and the others are using that now.
Yeah. Sir, let's talk about the first half. In the first half, we didn't see the effects yet. They're set to kick in the second half. How would you describe the first half for this sector? And given everything, the tariff perhaps at 20% set to take effect on August 1st, how's this second half shaping up for the exports sector?
Our export to the U.S. even went up in the first half, a little. We had a survey last May of our exporters, and they say 90% says we're just doing what we are doing in the past, without minding the 17%, because they could adjust prices, they could
It's
compete.
been business as usual in the first half.
10% says our buyers are worried, they're on hold. So, but that's very small.
Okay. Have you already seen some fallouts? Canceled orders in preparation for the second half, canceled orders, delays, or maybe even hesitation? How worried is the export sector right now?
Well, in the second half, what we're worrying is the tariff of the other competitors might be lowered. And the ones of Vietnam, even without the lowering of the tariff, we're hardly being able to compete with them. With the same tariff as ours, with the support that they have, which we do not get from the government right now, Thailand share in the U.S., Vietnam's share in the U.S. market is 3%. No? Thailand is 1.5%.
3% of U.S. imports.
Malaysia is 1.5%, and I think Thailand 1%. Ours is 1%.
Yes,
no?
0.2%. Taking a look at that, because you have to take a look at our tariff rate, and you also have to take a look at it in the context of the tariff rates of the others, because these are competitors, sir. When Vietnam, again, accounts for over 3% of U.S. imports, Malaysia and Thailand not too far behind at 0.2%. You know, where did we fall short? What are we doing wrong, and what can we do to get better?
Well, I would like to mention that the glorious days of export are during FBR time.
During the Ramos administration.
Export as the linchpin of economic development. He worked all over the world, marketing. That's the time that we were able to get electronics. We didn't believe that we were able to get electronics. In 1998, at the height of problems, crisis all over the world, our export grew by 21%, if not the highest in the whole world, at least the highest in Asia. And our share of the GDP was 55%, because he supported export and he believed in export. And after that, we're just going down.
We want to bring those times back, sir. What are the immediate and long-term responses we need from this administration in order to bring back the golden days of Philippine export?
Well, number one, of course, goes down to funding, like anything geared to what our neighbors are giving to the exporting sector in terms of R&D, in terms of other product development, in terms of marketing, in terms of policy, in ease of doing business. I think we can approximate. We were very competitive. We were beating them before. And afterwards, we lost this competitiveness with them.
Are you calling for any specific reforms? Any specific reforms, sir, to pave the way?
We have the export development plan every 3 years. And it's a good plan, but we cannot implement it because, again, there's no funding required. You know, the one expected to push export is basically in the forefront is DTI. DTI is one of the lowest budget.
Yeah. How much funding do you think they'd need to jumpstart our export sector, sir?
Frankly, you give 10% of what you're giving away, and look at it as investing in export, we'll probably need less to fund to support that, because we'll have jobs, we'll have better jobs for our people.
Yeah.
And it will be sustainable.
So in terms of budget, sir, what's the figure? Can you give a figure? Magkano ho, sir, would you like for the budget to really
I'll give you an
help our
example.
export
The
sector?
last number I saw in the conditional cash transfer before was 87 billion. And I think 15 billion of that is only to monitor. No? If you give some, even just the monitoring money to export development, to DTI, so that they can really improve their postings, I think it will go a long way. And you know, when we go abroad for exhibition, our booths are pathetic. Our booths are pathetic. I mean, we cannot compete. And exporters cannot afford to go because they are not subsidized like what Thailand,
Yeah.
Malaysia, and
How can we
and this
think,
and
how
that.
can we reframe our export strategy in the context of this changing trade or global trade order, sir?
Well, again, as I said, we have the export development plan, we have the strategy, we have but we don't have the funding.
Implementation and
Implementation
funding.
is the problem.
It's the
We
funding
cannot
to
implement.
implement the plans. Okay, so your message to exporters now and your message to the government, sir. What
Well,
would you
my
like?
message to exporter is, I think, is just saying what is obvious. Exporters are trying everything that they do, trying to find new markets, trying to improve their costings. But my main message is to the government: let's take export seriously, and let's see, in the same manner as I would like them to take SME seriously, and really allocate budget and look at it not as an expense but as investment.
Yeah. I'd ask you for your full year forecast for exports for 2025, but with everything so iffy, we don't know if that 20% is going to stick. What would you like to say as we zoom out and take a look at our export sector more broadly, taking into account the full year 2025?
Well, I hope that the president will be able to persuade Trump and remind him. I think he can. I think he can. He has enough leverage with us being the best ally here in this part of the world, very strategic to them. I think he should be able to remind him
Well,
that we are special to them.
yeah, I hope so. I hope that reminder is made and that reminder sticks and strikes a chord with President Trump. Thank you so much for your time this morning, sir. Sergio Ortiz Luis Jr., the President of the Employers Confederation of the Philippines and PhilExport. We're taking a short break. Business 360 will be right back. Welcome back. The tourism sector remains a key growth driver under the Marcos administration. The country's tourism direct gross value rose 2.4 trillion in 2024, up from 2.12 trillion in 2023. Tourism Secretary Cristina Frasco highlights a holistic approach to tourism development, emphasizing the balance of economic opportunity, cultural integrity, and inclusive infrastructure. But the real test is scaling responsibly without losing sight of what makes the Philippines worth visiting in the first place. Now, 1 year after President Marcos's 2024 State of the Nation address, the economy shows mixed results on his key promises. Inflation is down, but economic growth remains below target. So what's really been achieved? Sujin Kim has the details.
1 year since President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.'s 2024 State of the Nation address, the Philippine economy presents a mixed scorecard on his key promises. A top priority then was taming inflation, and on that front, progress is undeniable. Headline inflation has steadily declined since July 2024, reaching its lowest level in years.
Ano na talaga going down, so the SONA happened July 2024. The general direction since July 2024 is that inflation rate at the headline inflation is actually going down.
And for Filipinos, no item is more crucial than rice, which saw one of its biggest drops in years.
This is the biggest drop in terms of year-on-year inflation rate for rice.
The private sector has taken notice. The British Chamber of Commerce gave high marks for the administration's performance.
I would give it an 8, ocho. I think it is done very well, particularly with inflation. And we've seen inflation now, I think the last report was 1.4%. That actually is a significant achievement. It's a good performance, particularly on inflation and giving scope for further rate cuts by the Banco Central.
While inflation is under control, economic growth has been more restrained, GDP remains below the government's 6% target, indicating a recovery, but a tempered one. Since last year's SONA, GDP expanded 5.2% in the third quarter, ticked up to 5.3% in the fourth quarter, and 5.4% in Q1 of this year, roughly on track but still below the government's 6% target. International institutions have tempered expectations. The World Bank forecasts GDP to hover around 5.3% in 2025, rising to 5.5% by 2027.
The Philippines has recorded robust but decelerating growth.
With prices falling but growth still subdued, the Philippine economy finds itself subdued. President Marcos devoted a large portion of his 2024 SONA to infrastructure promises under the Build Better More agenda.
The CLEX, NLEX-SLEX connector and the Plaridel bypass will be fully completed by the end of this year. CALAX and the C5 South Link will be fully operational by next year. Dahil sa mga mahalagang daan na ito, ang norte, gitnang Luzon, Maynila at katimugang Luzon ay lalo pa ngayon magiging mas konektado sa isa't isa.
Foremost was the completion of major Luzon expressways under the Luzon Spine Network. So, have these timelines been met? The NLEX-SLEX connector is still incomplete. Its 1.2-kilometer missing link in Pandacan was delayed due to right-of-way issues and informal settler relocation. Proponents now expect it to be ready in 18 to 24 months, provided land acquisition is resolved. Meanwhile, the Central Luzon Link Expressway's Phase 1 is complete, connecting Tarlac to Nueva Ecija. But the Plaridel bypass, while nearing completion, remains unfinished. Meanwhile, work on the last sections of CALAX and the C5 South Link is on track for completion in 2025. Infrastructure improvements aren't confined to Luzon. The 3.2-kilometer Pangil Bay Bridge, the longest in northern Mindanao, was inaugurated 2 months after the SONA. It now connects Lanao del Norte and Misamis Occidental in just 7 minutes, down from a 2-hour drive. Over in Zamboanga, the Guicam Bridge connecting Olutanga Island to the mainland is still under construction, but now over 87% complete. In the transport sector, the president also heralded what he called a railway renaissance.
We are also in the midst of a railway renaissance. Other railway projects such as the MRT-7 and the North-South Commuter Railway are likewise progressing. We will make sure that the right-of-way issues are resolved in the most equitable, efficient, and expeditious manner so that these will not get in the way of our infrastructure development.
What is the progress? According to the Transportation Department, as of mid-2025, the 147-kilometer north-south commuter railway linking Clark to Calamba is about 30% complete, while the 22-kilometer MRT-7 from Quezon City to Bulacan is over 80% finished. If these timelines hold, MRT-7 could begin operations in 2025, and NSCR segments may partially open by 2026. Another big promise from last year, the LRT-1 Cavite extension. The long-awaited LRT-1 Cavite extension is now a reality. Marcos said the line would extend from Baclaran to Sucat by end 2024, and that milestone was met. In November, 5 new stations opened. Stay with us for part 2 of this special SONA report as we review the president's promises on energy, digitalization, employment, and foreign investments. Sujin Kim, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
Fuel prices are set to rise again this week, adding pressure on commuters, businesses, and transport groups alike. Gasoline could go up by 30 to 50 centavos per liter, while diesel may jump by as much as 70 to 90 centavos. The Energy Department expects an average increase of around 50 centavos per liter, blaming a combination of stronger global demand and tighter supply of crude and refined products. Jetty Petroleum President Leo Velas says that the pressure is likely to continue, especially as the market heads into peak consumption season. Philippine Ambassador to the United States Jose Manuel Romualdez warns thousands of undocumented Filipinos in the U.S. could be deported due to tighter immigration policies of the Trump administration. The ambassador says nearly 4,000 undocumented Filipinos are now on the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement's radar. But Romualdez said the issue might not be tackled during the meeting between President Marcos and U.S. President Donald Trump. He calls on Filipinos who will be affected to seek the help of immigration lawyers. Now, a stunning turn of events for overseas Filipino workers. At least 18 seafarers were forcibly removed from a Carnival cruise ship in Virginia, deported and banned from entering the United States for 10 years. The incident took place aboard the Carnival Sunshine, docked at the Port of Norfolk. Despite holding valid 10-year visas, the Filipino crew members were escorted off the vessel and sent home without formal charges. According to a joint statement from the National Federation of Filipino American Associations and the Filipino Workers Center. The groups warn this could set a dangerous precedent for migrant workers worldwide, raising questions about due process, discrimination, and workplace rights abroad. The NC has reached out to the Department of Migrant Workers for comment, but has yet to hear back from them. Now, the bigger concern is if this can happen to legally deployed Filipino seafarers, what protections do other OFWs really have in a shifting global labor landscape? We're taking a breather. Business 360 will be right back. Welcome back. U.S. President Donald Trump is denying reports that his own Treasury chief warned against firing Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell as pressure mounts for a rate cut amid global market volatility. In a post on Truth Social, Trump slammed a Wall Street Journal story as, quote, untruthful, denying that Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent ever advised that firing Powell would rattle markets. Trump declared, quote, people don't explain to me, I explain to them. The comment comes as investors worldwide brace for a new round of tariffs, political infighting at central banks, and growing uncertainty over the future of may visit China ahead of the APEC summit in South Korea this October, potentially setting the stage for a critical meeting with President Xi Jinping. The trip comes amid escalating tariff tensions between the world's two largest economies, with Washington and Beijing locked in negotiations to contain a trade war that's disrupting global supply chains. Trump has pushed for broad tariffs to boost U.S. manufacturing, including duties on nearly all foreign goods. Chinese imports now face a punitive 55% rate, but critics warn that the strategy is backfiring, driving up costs for American consumers and adding uncertainty to the global economy. A face-to-face meeting could mark a turning point or a new flashpoint, depending on what's at stake for both sides. Before we close, we turn to a different kind of story, a personal tribute to a young business leader gone too soon. Paulo Pawi Tantoco, grandson of the founders of retail icon Rustan's, passed away a few months ago. Those who knew him remember a life lived with purpose, grace, and humility. Here's a look back at a quiet force who led not with fanfare, but with heart. Paulo Pawi Tantoco passed away on March 8th in Los Angeles, California. He was 44 years old. He came from a family that introduced many global brands to the Philippines through Rustan's, a department store rooted in service, heritage, and family enterprise. While he wasn't often in the spotlight, Pawi played a quiet, consistent role behind many of the family's most recognizable ventures, spanning retail, real estate, and leisure development. He held leadership positions across the group's interests, including Assistant Vice President at Rustan's Commercial Corporation, COO of Pacific Links Golf Development, and Head of Security and Procurement at Santa Elena Golf and Country Estate. To colleagues and friends, he led with integrity and intention. Steady, thoughtful, and always grounded. He didn't need to command a room. He elevated it. He was also deeply kind to those with less, generous without needing recognition, and attentive to people often overlooked. He never sought attention, but he left his mark, purposeful, steady, deeply respected. He was a husband, a father, a son, a friend. And in every role, he showed up fully with compassion and quiet dignity. May his memory be a blessing, and may the life he lived continue to inspire quiet leadership, inner strength, and a commitment to living with heart in all of us. And that's it for Business 360. I'm Maiki Oreta. Thank you for joining us, and keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.